The Birmingham Stallions are undeniably, at least with the information we have right now, right? Technically, none of us know what we're talking about because we haven't seen any games yet. We're basing our information off of, these teams before the current iteration of this league that they're playing in even existed. But with the information we have right now, the Birmingham Stallions are undeniably the best team and the favorites to win the UFL in 2024. Last season, they won the USFL Championship for a second year in a row. The USFL has existed well, it existed in the 80s, but besides that, in recent memory, the current iteration of the USFL, the Birmingham Stallions won both championships. They went 21-3 over the course of 2 seasons. That's regardless of who you're playing, what your competition is, that is complete and utter domination. 21-3 total record in both USFL seasons that we've seen in the past 2 years. They've been dominating everything. Now, with that said, the Stallions do lose their starting quarterback, Alex McGough. He's on the Green Bay Packers now. That's another aspect of the UFL that I find very fascinating, is the fact that the best players, right in the NFL, there's the roster turnover is largely, and I understand the fact that we just went through one of the most chaotic free agencies in history, but there usually isn't very much roster turnover, right? Once you find your franchise quarterback, that person is your franchise quarterback for a very long time. Aaron Rodgers was on the Green Bay Packers for a very long time. Tom Brady was on the Patriots for a very long time. When you have these great players that have longevity in the league, they're going to stay on your team for a very long time. But if you're someone like the Birmingham Stallions, it's almost a bittersweet moment because you have Alex McGough, you're dominating the USFL, but in the back of your mind, if you're a diehard Birmingham Stallions fan, in the back of mind the whole time you're thinking, he's going to go to the NFL. And we've seen that so many times. I could just start naming guys that were at the top of the league last year, producing at the highest level in the XFL or in the USFL. They're on NFL rosters now. And so it's almost like in college football where if you have a small school, I'm just going to pick on James Madison, where James Madison, great program. They moved from FCS to FBS. They end up ranked in the AP poll for D1A in their first year being in that highest level of college football. And then they lose all their players. Now, of course, their coach ended up going to IU, and so that's partially why. But you see that a lot of times where some of these smaller schools will produce a ton of talent and have a ton of success, and then all of a sudden their talent leaves because they have better opportunities elsewhere. And this isn't a college football debate at this time. But the Birmingham Stallions and every other team in the UFL has to worry about the same things, where your best players, there's a pretty good chance they're going to the NFL. Now, sure, this happened to Jordan Ta'amu at least 3 times in his life, and this happened to Luis Perez. This happens to basically every top-level quarterback. All of the top-level quarterbacks in the UFL, or the USFL, the XFL, the AAF, whatever spring football league you want to talk about, they all try to go to the NFL, and usually it doesn't work out, unfortunately, because they're just barely outside that paper ceiling. They can't quite break through, and then they end up back in the spring league, which is why this works so perfectly, is because they can have their NFL season, and if they're not permanently on an NFL roster, if it's clear that they don't yet have longevity in the NFL, you can just turn around 3 months later and play in the UFL. Jordan Ta'amu and Luis Perez, the 2 best quarterbacks in the XFL conference, as recently as 2 weeks ago announced they're going to play in the UFL. 3 weeks ago, the UFL looked a whole lot different, and now we have those guys back, but we do not have Alex McGough back at this time. And so that's the number one question we have to ask about the Birmingham Stallions is, are they going to be able to fill that role? And I have some huge alarm bells that I want to sort of ring over your head here, because there is a very strong potential, a very strong opportunity for the Birmingham Stallions to employ a 2-quarterback system. We saw that a little bit last season. We saw that a little bit more so 2 seasons ago. Alex McGough, he was a run-first quarterback. Jamar Smith was also very mobile, but he had a little bit more of a cannon of an arm. We saw that dichotomy. We saw them to complement one another and play a 2-quarterback system. Alex McGough got maybe 75% of the snaps, but there were drives where Jamar Smith would come in, and he would just play the whole drive. No matter what happens, no matter how well it's going, Jamar Smith's going to play the whole drive. There were times where maybe the Birmingham Stallions, maybe they get into the red zone and they say, okay, now we're switching back to McGough, or maybe we're switching back to Jamar Smith. We saw some semblance of a 2-quarterback system, and what's interesting is they have a very similar complementary quarterback room this season than they are compared to the one that they had last season. Alex McGough, run-first quarterback, he's gone now. who could be a run-first quarterback that maybe is, behind Jamar Smith in the depth chart, but still very capable and still very competent? Adrian Martinez. And this is the part where I want to point out the fact that there are big-name quarterbacks in this league. These are not just no-names. You may not have heard of Jamar Smith, but you've probably, if you're a decent football fan and you're a reasonably in-depth college football fan, you know who Adrian Martinez is. From Kansas State, from Nebraska. He's could be more of a run-first complement to Holtz's head coach Skip Holtz, his scheme, and Adrian Martinez very well could fill McGough's role. On top of that, Jamar Smith can run himself. I'm very, very positive that there's a high chance that we could see on Saturday 2 quarterbacks starting considerable reps for the Birmingham Stallions. Jamar Smith has an arm. He played for Skip Holtz in college and the last 2 years on the Stallions, so he knows the system very, very well. There's going to be no confusion, or at least there shouldn't be any confusion on Jamar Smith's side between him, his coach, and his receivers. Maybe it's a different story for Adrian Martinez. Adrian Martinez, he's another quarterback on here. I could very well see him starting. His accuracy and precision really helped Kansas State reach new heights of success. We could see the same thing with the Birmingham Stallions. If Jamar Smith is having a bad day throwing the ball and you need someone to come in and, make a 25-yard pass on 3rd and 15 to, set up a red zone opportunity late in the game, Adrian Martinez could be your guy. But for the Stallions, the quarterback talent does not end there because Jalen Morton was their 3rd pick in the dispersal draft in the 3rd round. Remember, the dispersal draft, that was where the 4 USFL teams that don't exist anymore, so that would be like the Pittsburgh Maulers, for example, their players were selected by the 4 remaining teams because you want, obviously, the best players in your league at all times. You want the best USFL players on the USFL conference rosters. Jalen Morton has a ton of potential. He's still the number 3 quarterback for now. The Stallions, you're starting to see why this team is so good. Those are your top 3 quarterbacks. All of them are at least competent enough to be backups, or if you're playing a 2-quarterback system, at least competent enough to garner maybe 35% of the snaps, we'll say. Adrian Martinez, he could be a starter. Jamar Smith is the starter, and he has been the starter, and he has had to fill that role when Alex McGough has been hurt or maybe is just out for a drive in the past 2 seasons, contributing to the Stallions' ability to win games. He's not perfect. We've seen problems with Jamar Smith in the past with overthrowing receivers. His arm is almost so strong that I don't think he's used to, if he's throwing a 40-yard pass down the field, it goes for 60 yards. If he has to throw it deep, it is more times than not too deep of a throw for his receivers, just because I don't think he quite has the discipline or he just hasn't toned his game well enough to the point where if you're throwing it deep, the difference between a 50-yard deep ball and a 40-yard deep ball doesn't exist, or at least hasn't existed for Jamar Smith. We'll have to see if that issue has gotten fixed, but that's the number one thing that I worry about with him, especially throwing into, deep coverage where if your opponent's playing some sort of a cover 6 sky or cover 4 where you're throwing into deeper safeties and you're just throwing the ball to the defense, that very well could be a concern for Jamar Smith. It's the UFL, right? None of these quarterbacks are amazing. We're not talking about any Tom Brady's here. But we're talking about still great quarterbacks, very capable quarterbacks, very competent quarterbacks, albeit with their own strengths and weaknesses. Jamar Smith is a perfect example. So you have those 3 quarterbacks, Jamar Smith, Adrian Martinez, Jalen Morton. All 3 of them could at least be employed in a 2-quarterback system. Their 4th quarterback, by the way, Matt Corral. And if you follow football in any capacity, you know who Matt Corral is. He was on Ole Miss as recently as 2021. He brought that team back to a New Year's Six Bowl, got hurt in the bowl game, which I assume is going to be fine at this point in his career, was drafted by the Carolina Panthers. He was very hyped up. He could have been a very, very strong depth piece in the NFL. Now he's in the UFL. He's their 4th-string quarterback, most likely. That just goes to show how great this Birmingham Stallions team is. Matt Corral, we're talking about the UFL, right? The UFL, it's spring football. These are USFL teams and XFL teams. None of these teams are supposed to be great, and Matt Corral, probably the best, well, I shouldn't say that, one of the best quarterbacks in Ole Miss history, a great story in 2021 for that team and for that program. He's the 4th-string quarterback on the best team in the UFL. That goes to show how much talent there is. That goes to show how much really intrigue and storylines we could have once we get to this weekend on Saturday and Sunday when the Stallions take on the Renegades, and we have the other 3 games there that we'll talk about later today. These 4 quarterbacks, all of them are great. All of them are very capable of starting. It's going to be Jamar Smith. I assume with Adrian Martinez one step below him, maybe taking 35% of the snaps like we saw Jamar Smith do for Alex McGough in the past 2 years of the Birmingham Stallions' time in the USFL, as they've just been dominating everybody and winning championships left and right. On top of that, the Stallions are the best team in the league for a reason. They have one of the better O-lines in the UFL. They have great receivers, and especially with Jamar Smith's arm, this could be a very high-octane offense, a very fun team to watch. We've seen that multiple QB system in the past. Maybe we will see it again. And we just mentioned the fact that they really bolster their offensive line. Remember, the dispersal draft. There are a lot of great players. There are a lot of very scary players, if you're fans of other teams, that were in the USFL draft pool. The dispersal draft, there were 3 phases of it. I don't need to explain all of it. I'm going to talk about the 3 top draft picks that the Birmingham Stallions picked up. It's not many because the Stallions, their roster was already the best in the league. They're adding to it a little bit first with an offensive tackle named Calvin Ashley, an all USFL tackle from the New Jersey Generals. New Jersey Generals, by the way, I really, really wish they were in this league. I really wish they made the cut. Unfortunately, they didn't. But the New Jersey Generals were one of my favorite teams to watch just because the way they ran the ball, they had a 3 Musketeers running back trio situation. And just Luis Perez was on that team. And I believe DeAndre Smith was on that team. And they ran also a 2 quarterback system. And just watching the Generals, watching them play the game, it was very fascinating, very fun. Their colors were good. Their logo was, in my opinion, incredible. And they didn't make the cut. Maybe they'll come back. The UFL is planning to expand as soon as next year, certainly 2026. We could see some more teams. I hope the New Jersey Generals come back. But either way, the New Jersey Generals offensive line had the most rushing yards last season and the lowest amount of sacks allowed. So Generals running backs rushed for more yards than any other team in the USFL, which partially falls on the offensive line, right? That's some level of success for them, especially when you pair that with the fact that they had the lowest amount of allowed sacks throughout the entire season. For the Generals, Calvin Ashley was a large part of that. He is now on the Birmingham Stallions, alongside Marcus Baugh, a tight end from Michigan. He's going to expand the passing game. The Stallions have one of the better tight end room, probably the best tight end room in the entire league, led by Jace Sternberger. He's been a staple of spring football for a long time. He's an incredible tight end. He's essentially the Travis Kelce or the George Kittle, whoever you want to say. He's the best. He's the face of the league for tight ends in the UFL. There's now a solid foundation of depth behind him with Marcus Baugh. And then the Stallions' 3rd pick in the dispersal draft, they took a kicker. His name is Chris Blewett, which is very ironic, by the way. His last name is Blewett. He's a kicker. I really hope that doesn't come up for them, because if they're in the playoffs and they miss a game-winning kick, the internet's going to go wild with the fact that his name is Chris Blewett. But nonetheless, in the draft, they bolstered their offensive line a little bit, just made that much better, just made the rushing attack that much more scary, just made their pass protection that much more imposing. And they added depth behind Jay Sternberger, which is going to be very important because now the tight end aspect of the offense is far more represented. It's far more it's far more of a threat, right? If you just have Jay Sternberger, it's way easier to game plan around Jay Sternberger and figure out how you're going to use your linebackers to take away that aspect of the offense and that weapon in the offense. But then if you throw in Marcus Baugh on the other side of the field, now you have other problems, right? So their passing game is expanded. Their offensive line is fortified. We'll see how much of an impact those players have on this season when we get to it. And I'm thankful for those players because the Stallions lost a lot of talent. They lost Alex McGough to the Packers. They lost, as recently as 8-9 days ago, they lost running back Bo Scarborough to retirement. He retired. Alex McGough is on the Packers. That's their by far best running back and by far, of course, best quarterback. Gone. Not going to play for the Stallions this year. Borderline 0% chance. But they're solid everywhere else, right? The receiver core, incredible. The secondary, incredible. Their linebacker room, incredible. Their D-line, maybe a little bit less incredible, but still great. Still not a concern or a warning sign at all whatsoever. This team, when we look at their strengths, everything comes to mind, receivers come to mind. At this point, in my opinion, quarterback comes to mind, offensive line. But the real strength that the Birmingham Stallions have, the real way they're going to win games and just suffocate opponents and ensure that they can't score any points all game long, is with pass defense. Their linebacking core is maybe the best in the league. Scooby Wright is a household name at this point in spring football. They also have Chris Orr, an all-USFL linebacker. That's a huge aspect of the defense. They're going to take away the crossing routes, right? Those linebackers, they're going to take away the short, over-the-middle passing game as much as they possibly can. The secondary is incredible as well. They drafted Kenny Robinson and Mark Gilbert later in the draft. I didn't mention them before, but I'm mentioning them now. Gilbert was the best defensive back in the entire USFL with the Pittsburgh Maulers, He was an all-USFL selection. They already had JoJo Tillery and Lorenzo Burns, two other great aspects of the safeties core. It's an all-around no-fly zone, right? I could keep naming guys. Neville Clark, Daniel Isom. These names mean nothing to you now, but they might mean something to you once we get to Saturday when this team takes on the Arlington Renegades. I don't know exactly who's going to pull away as clear starters. Do Lorenzo Burns and JoJo Tillery retain their positions there? Mark Gilbert, Kenny Robinson, are they stealing some starting jobs? We really don't know yet. We just finished up training camp for the UFL. We're going to find out who is starting, who is playing for this Birmingham Stallions team at 1 p.m. on Saturday. But either way, it doesn't matter who's starting because this Birmingham Stallions secondary is so deep and so talented. Those names probably mean nothing to you. I didn't just say Patrick Peterson, right? I didn't say Richard Sherman. That doesn't mean these players aren't great. It doesn't mean that they're not fully capable of really limiting opposing passing attacks. You pair that with a great linebacking core, and you're looking at a situation where, especially in the UFL, you're playing against quarterbacks. For example, the Michigan Panthers, their starting quarterback is likely going to be E.J. Perry. If it's not, it's Brian Lewerke. Put plainly, the Michigan Panthers don't have the best quarterback situation in the league. Some of those less capable quarterbacks, it's over. They're not going to be able to beat out, especially if they have receivers that are not capable of beating out some of these corners. They're not going to be able to succeed at a high level week in and week out against the Birmingham Stallions. They're going to win games by taking away some of the weaker passing games completely, reducing that threat to zero. And then you're looking at a situation where maybe the Michigan Panthers only scoring 10 points, 9 points against the Stallions when they play them 2 times this year. The secondary is going to have a major role in that. The running back room, if we flip back over to the offense, the running back room, they lost Bo Scarborough. Honestly, I don't think they care. Unbelievable depth, a very stacked running back room. CJ Marable and Ricky Person Jr. are going to be the most prominent running backs for this team. Marable can really pound the rock. He can really get those hard-fought yards. You're looking at those 2nd and 2s with a loaded box. CJ Marable's got you. He also can catch. He had the 3rd most receptions on the Birmingham Stallions last year. And remember, this is a Stallions team with Victor Bolden Jr. on it. This is a Stallions team with Jay Sternberger on it. Still, Marable had the 3rd most receptions on the team last year. Larry Roundtree III is a name to know in the backfield as well. Long story short, they have a ton of depth. They're going to fight for the tough yards. This is the type of running back room that you really appreciate in any level of football, because if your quarterback can just get you to 2nd and 3, if your quarterback can get you to 3rd and 2, the drive's over. You're getting the first down, right? It's almost like the tush push for the Philadelphia Eagles. If they get to a 4th and 1, if it's 3rd and 2 and you're running the ball like normal, you're not worried about whether or not you're going to get the first down. If you just get close enough, Jalen Hurts is going to be pushed over that first down marker. He's going to get the first down. You're going to have a new set of downs. It seems to be a similar situation in a different way with the Birmingham Stallions, where this running back room is so talented and frankly just so skillful that if you can make it 2nd and 5, you're probably going to get the first down. And if it's 2nd and goal, you're probably going to score. That's the main strength on the offense, is the running back room, on top of the fact that they have Victor Bolden Jr., on top of the fact that they have Jay Sternberger, and their quarterbacks are very, very competent and capable as well. The defense looks great. The secondary, that pass defense, is going to be very threatening. So the long story short is, can they win a championship in 2024? We're going to ask this question with every single team today in this episode, but can the Birmingham Stallions win a championship? The answer is obviously. Actually, they're probably the most likely to do so across the USFL Conference and the XFL Conference. They're the most complete roster in the league. They have a 21-3 all-time record. I don't need to say much more than that. They're the favorites. Everyone is chasing down the Birmingham Stallions, starting with the Arlington Renegades in the first game of the season, just 4 or 5 days away from now at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. It's going to feel like an NFL game. You're turning on Fox at 1 p.m. You have the Birmingham Stallions playing. It's going to feel like an NFL game, even though the quality of play is technically not even close. That's all I have on the Birmingham Stallions. They are the favorites to win the UFL Championship. If you asked me to bet my life on a team winning the UFL in 2024, my answer would be resoundingly the Birmingham Stallions.